Israel is not destroyed. Let me be absolutely clear about that before we go any further. The headline is sensationalist garbage designed to generate clicks through catastrophic language that does not match reality. Israel is under sustained attack. Israel is experiencing the most intense missile bombardment in its history. Israeli cities are being hit, civilians are sheltering, the country is on war footing. But Israel is not destroyed. The state functions, the military functions, the economy, while severely strained, functions. The difference between being under attack and being destroyed is enormous, and conflating the two is not just inaccurate. It is dangerous because it creates panic, misinformation, and misunderstanding about what is actually happening and what the trajectories are. Now that we have established what is not happening, let me tell you what is happening, because what is happening is serious enough without exaggeration. Iran has launched the largest sustained missile campaign against Israel in the nation's history. Not a single strike, not a limited retaliation, a sustained campaign. Multiple waves, dozens to hundreds of missiles fired over hours and days. The attacks are coordinated, timed to overwhelm Israel's defense systems through saturation, launching enough projectiles in rapid succession that the interceptor batteries cannot reload fast enough, that the radar systems cannot track everything simultaneously. The gaps emerge in the coverage, and some missiles get through. The missiles are ballistic, long-range, capable of traveling thousands of kilometers from Iranian territory to Tel Aviv. This is not artillery fire from Gaza. This is strategic weaponry. The kind of missiles that carry conventional warheads now, but that could, in a different scenario, carry other payloads, chemical, biological, nuclear. If Iran ever crosses that threshold, the existence of this arsenal, and Iran has demonstrated willingness to use it, changes the security equation for Israel in fundamental ways. Israel has always known that Iran had missiles, but knowing abstractly that an adversary has capabilities is different from experiencing those capabilities deployed against your cities and sustained waves that your defenses struggle to fully counter. Life inside Israel has become surreal. The warning sirens give 60 seconds to get from wherever you are to a shelter. If you are in a building with a reinforced room, you go there. If you are on the street, you find the nearest public shelter. If you're driving, you pull over and lie flat. 60 seconds. The sirens are sounding multiple times per day, sometimes multiple times per hour during the peak of the attacks. This is not sustainable psychologically. Human beings are not built to live in a state of constant alert. The adrenaline, the fear, the disruption, it accumulates. It creates trauma. Children are especially vulnerable. Imagine being a child in Tel Aviv right now. You cannot go to school because schools are closed. You cannot play outside because you need to be within sprinting distance of a shelter. Your parents are stressed. The news is terrifying. The explosions are real. You hear them. You feel them. You see the damage. This is a generation being shaped by trauma, and trauma at scale creates social and political consequences that persist for decades. The wartime censorship adds to the surrealism. The Israeli military censor restricts what can be published about the impacts. The goal is operational security. If Iran knows exactly where its missiles are hitting, it can adjust targeting for the next wave. If Iran knows which defense systems are located where, it can plan attacks to exploit gaps. So the information is controlled. Journalists cannot report precise locations. Damage assessments are delayed or vague. Casualty figures are aggregated rather than detailed. This is standard wartime practice, but it creates information vacuums, and information vacuums get filled with rumors, speculation, and panic. People do not know if their relatives are safe. They do not know if their neighborhood was hit. The official silence intended to protect operational security creates psychological insecurity that compounds the fear the defense systems are performing. This needs to be emphasized because the narrative that Israel is being destroyed implies that the defenses have failed. They have not failed. Iron Dome, David Sling, Arrow, the entire layered system is intercepting the majority of incoming missiles. The success rate is high, probably above 90%, but 90% interception when the attack involves hundreds of missiles means that 10% get through. 10 missiles out of 110 missiles hitting a city cause damage, cause casualties, cause destruction. The fact that 90 were intercepted is impressive, technically, but it does not change the reality that the 10 that got through are enough to create the conditions of emergency that Israel is experiencing. And here's the problem that keeps Israeli defense planners awake. The interceptors are expensive and finite. Each Iron Dome interceptor costs tens of thousands of dollars. Each Arrow interceptor costs millions. Israel has stockpiles. The United States is resupplying. Emergency airlifts are bringing interceptors from American arsenals. Production has been ramped up, but production of these systems is not infinite. There are manufacturing constraints, supply chain constraints, skilled labor constraints. You cannot simply print interceptors the way central banks print money. If Iran can sustain missile launches faster than Israel and America can resupply interceptors, the math eventually breaks, the defense runs out of ammunition, and once the defense is depleted, the missiles hit without resistance. Iran knows this. The saturation strategy is not just about overwhelming the defense. In a single wave, it is about exhausting the defense over weeks or months until the stockpiles are gone and Israel is forced to choose between allowing missiles to hit undefended cities or drastically escalating the conflict to destroy Iran's launch capabilities before the interceptors run out. This is a war of attrition fought with precision-guided weapons and advanced technology. But the logic is the same as every attrition war in history. Whoever can sustain losses longer wins. In Iran, with a population 4 times larger than Israel's, with an industrial base that can produce missiles domestically, with suppliers in Russia and China and North Korea willing to provide components despite sanctions, believes it can outlast Israel's defensive capacity. The economic impact inside Israel is devastating in ways that are not yet fully visible, but that will compound over time. The country is on total war footing. Reserves have been called up. Hundreds of thousands of workers have been pulled from the civilian economy to serve in the military. Every reservist activated is a job left unfilled, a business disrupted, and income lost. Israel's economy is advanced and diversified, but it is also small. It depends on a highly skilled labor force that cannot be in two places simultaneously. You cannot be a software engineer in Tel Aviv and a soldier in the field at the same time. The mobilization is necessary for survival, but it is killing economic productivity. GDP is contracting, tax revenues are falling. Government spending is exploding, the deficit is widening, and the longer the war lasts, the more severe the economic damage becomes. Tourism has stopped completely. Who is going to vacation in a country where missile sirens sound multiple times per day? The tourism sector, which employed hundreds of thousands and generated billions in revenue, is gone, not reduced, gone. Hotels are empty, restaurants are closed, airlines have suspended flights. The international airport operates on emergency schedules for repatriation and military supply flights. The economic activity that tourism generated, the multiplier effects through restaurants and shops and transportation has evaporated, and it is not coming back while the war continues. Foreign investment has frozen. Companies that were planning expansions in Israel have put those plans on hold. Venture capital that was flowing into Israeli tech startups has slowed dramatically, not because the startups were less innovative, because the risk premium on Israeli investments has spiked. Why invest in a country that might be uninhabitable if the war escalates further? The calculus is brutal and rational. Capital goes where it is safe. Israel is not safe. So capital leaves, and capital flight creates a doom loop. Less investment means less growth. Less growth means less tax revenue. Less tax revenue means more borrowing. More borrowing means higher interest rates. Higher interest rates mean less investment. The loop feeds on itself until something breaks. The psychological toll cannot be overstated. Continuous alarms, continuous sheltering, continuous uncertainty. This is not normal stress. This is acute, sustained psychological trauma inflicted on an entire population. Adults are struggling, sleep deprivation from nighttime alarms, anxiety disorders spiking, depression rates climbing, substance abuse increasing as people search for ways to cope with the relentless pressure. Children are terrified, bedwetting nightmares, behavioral problems, regression and development, parents trying to maintain normally while their own fear is palpable. The elderly who remember previous wars are reliving trauma. Veterans with PTSD from past conflicts are triggered constantly. Families are fracturing under the pressure. Domestic violence rises in these conditions. Divorce rates climb. Mental health services already strained are overwhelmed. The social fabric strains. And while these effects are not visible in the same way that physical damage to buildings is visible, they are real and they are lasting. A society under this kind of pressure changes. People become harder, more militant, less willing to compromise, more willing to support extreme measures to end the threat. The psychological transformation of Israeli society under sustained attack will shape Israeli politics for a generation, and the direction of that transformation is likely to be toward the right, toward nationalism, toward support for policies that prioritize security over everything else, regardless of the cost. The peace movement, such as it was, is dead, killed by the missiles, replaced by a consensus that security requires overwhelming force, that enemies cannot be negotiated with, but only defeated, that survival requires strength, and that strength requires sacrifice. The international dimension is where this gets truly dangerous because the conflict is not contained, it is radiating. The Strait of Hormuz is still closed. Global oil prices are at levels not seen since the 1970s. Brent crude above $150 per barrel in some markets. Gasoline prices in the United States approaching double digits per gallon. Europe facing energy rationing, Asia competing desperately for limited supplies. The disruption is not limited to the Middle East. It is global, and global disruptions create global pressures. Economies are contracting, not just slowing, contracting, negative growth. Recessions declared in multiple countries simultaneously. Inflation spiking not from demand, but from supply shocks that monetary policy cannot address. Central banks trapped between fighting inflation by raising rates, which kills growth, or supporting growth by keeping rates low, which allows inflation to accelerate. The stagflation that everyone feared, that every economist warned about, is here, and there is no policy toolkit that solves stagflation easily. The 1970s lasted a decade. We are in week one. Governments are facing political crisis. Populations furious about rising prices, about economic hardship, about the feeling that their leaders are powerless to protect them from forces beyond anyone's control. Protests are spreading. Not just in developing countries, in developed economies, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the United States, angry populations demanding solutions that do not exist. Demanding that politicians end the war, lower prices, restore normally, and politicians facing electoral destruction are scrambling for responses that satisfy the anger without addressing the fundamental reality that the war is not under their control and that the economic damage will persist as long as the Strait of Hormuz stays closed. The pressure on governments to act is creating pressure for intervention, for direct military involvement to reopen the strait, to destroy Iranian capabilities, to end the conflict through force. But intervention carries risks that terrify the very leaders being pressured to act. American intervention means American casualties, means American soldiers dying in a Middle Eastern war that the public opposes, means a draft if the conflict expands beyond what volunteer forces can handle, means costs measured in trillions of dollars that an already indebted government cannot afford, means the possibility of direct confrontation with Russia or China if they conclude that American destruction of Iran crosses a red line. The risks are enormous, but the pressure is real, and pressure sustained long enough overcomes caution. History is filled with wars that nobody wanted but that everyone felt compelled to fight because the alternatives seemed worse. The military operations on both sides show no sign of de-escalation. Israel is striking Iranian launch sites, Iranian command centers, Iranian Revolutionary Guard facilities, Iranian oil infrastructure in an effort to the regime's revenue. The strikes are extensive, coordinated, some are successful, launch sites destroyed, stockpiles hit, but Iran's missile infrastructure is dispersed, hardened, hidden in tunnels and underground facilities built over decades specifically to survive this kind of attack. Mobile launchers fire and relocate before counterstrikes arrive. The degradation is incremental, not decisive, and Iran, for its part, is not running out of missiles. Iran's production continues, domestic manufacturing of missiles and drones, imports from Russia and China and North Korea disguised as civilian goods or smuggled through third countries. The supply chain, despite sanctions, despite interdiction efforts, despite Israeli and American intelligence working to disrupt it, functions. Components arrive, missiles get assembled, launchers get loaded, and the campaign continues. Iran can sustain this longer than Israel's leadership wants to acknowledge publicly, because acknowledging it means admitting that the current strategy is not working, that attrition favors Iran, that Israel is slowly losing a war it cannot afford to lose. Israel faces a strategic dilemma with no good options. It can continue the current approach, intercepting missiles defensively, striking back at Iranian targets offensively, hoping that Iran's willingness to sustain the campaign erodes before Israel's interceptor stockpiles deplete. This is the attrition strategy, and it might work if Iranian domestic politics turn against the war, if the regime faces internal challenges that force it to shift resources away from the missile campaign, if Russian or Chinese support wavers. But none of these seem likely in the near term. The Iranian regime, despite internal tensions, is committed. Russian support is increasing, not decreasing. Chinese support remains steady. The calculation that attrition favors Israel may be wrong, or Israel can escalate massively, decisively. Strike not just launch sites, but the Iranian state itself. Target TAN with everything. Target regime leadership. Target energy infrastructure. Target the symbols and the substance of Iranian power. Use overwhelming force aimed not to degrade but to destroy, to decapitate the regime, to create conditions where Iran cannot continue the war because the government no longer functions. This is the decisive escalation strategy, and it carries risks that are almost impossible to overstate. It guarantees massive Iranian casualties, thousands, tens of thousands, possibly more. The images will be horrific. The international backlash will be severe. It likely triggers even larger retaliatory strikes in the window before Iran's capabilities are fully destroyed. Hezbollah activates fully from Lebanon. Tens of thousands of rockets launched at Israeli cities. Iraqi militias strike American bases. Houthi attacks on shipping intensify. The regional war that has been avoided becomes unavoidable, and the costs, already enormous, multiply. It risks great power. Intervention. If Russia or China conclude that the total collapse of Iran is strategically unacceptable, they may provide more direct support, not troops necessarily, but weapons, intelligence, diplomatic protection, economic lifelines, the kind of support that makes destroying Iran far harder and far more costly than current Israeli planning assumes. And if great power support materializes, Israel cannot win without American escalation, and American escalation means direct confrontation with Russia. or China, and direct confrontation between nuclear-armed great powers is the scenario that every strategist has spent 70 years trying to avoid. It risks nuclear escalation. If Iran, facing existential threat, makes the decision to weaponize its nuclear program in the time it has left before Israeli strikes, eliminate that capability. Iran has the fiscal material, Iran has the designs, Iran has the delivery systems. The decision to assemble a weapon could be made and executed in weeks under emergency conditions. And if Iran crosses the nuclear threshold while under attack, the calculus changes completely. Israel cannot destroy an Iranian nuclear weapon if it does not know where it is, and deterrence, which has kept nuclear weapons unused since 1945, becomes active in the Middle East in ways that terrify everyone involved. Neither option is good. Both carry enormous risks, but doing nothing is not an option because nothing means allowing the missile campaign to continue, allowing the economy to bleed, allowing the society to fracture under psychological pressure, and eventually allowing the defense to be exhausted to the point where missiles hit without interception. So Israel will choose, and the choice made in the coming days or weeks will determine the trajectory of the war and possibly the trajectory of the region for decades. The world is shocked not because Israel is destroyed. The world is shocked because the conflict that everyone tried to prevent, that everyone knew would be catastrophic if it happened, is happening. The missiles are flying, the cities are being hit, the casualties are mounting, the economic damage is global, the geopolitical consequences are unfolding in real time. There is no clear path to de-escalation because both sides have crossed thresholds that make compromise politically impossible. Iran has attacked Israeli cities directly, deliberately, with weapons designed to kill civilians. Israel has killed Iran's supreme leader and struck Iranian territory with the intent of destroying the regime as capabilities. The mutual escalation has created conditions where neither side can back down without appearing to have lost, and in conflicts where appearances matter as much as reality, where regime legitimacy depends on projecting strength, the inability to back down creates spirals that end only when one side is destroyed or when exhaustion forces a ceasefire that both sides violate as soon as they recover. Israel is not destroyed, but Israel is under sustained attack at a scale and intensity that tests the limits of its defense systems, its economy, its society, and its strategic options. The missiles rocking Tel Aviv are real, the sirens are real, the fear is real, the damage is real, the trauma is real, but the state endures. The question is for how long and at what cost. And whether the cost, even if Israel ultimately prevails militarily, is so high that the victory is Pyrrhic, that the economy is so damaged, the society so traumatized, the international relationship so strained, the next generation so scarred that what emerges from the war is a state that is technically victorious but fundamentally weakened in ways that take generations to repair. This is the war, not destroyed, but desperately fighting to avoid destruction, not collapsing, but straining under pressure that no state should have to endure indefinitely. The world is watching, the world is shocked, and the world is realizing too late that the mechanisms that prevented this war for decades have failed. The assumptions that kept the peace are dead. The alliances that prevented escalation are fractured. The economic order that depended on stable energy flows is breaking. And what comes next? What emerges from the rubble of the old order is uncertain, more dangerous, less stable, and far less forgiving of the mistakes that brought us here. The missiles are still flying, the sirens are still sounding, the shelters are still full. The war is not over. And the worst, despite everything that has already happened, may still be ahead. Because wars of this intensity, fought between adversaries with these capabilities, with these levels of commitment, with these incompatible objectives, do not end cleanly. They end messily, violently, with consequences that nobody predicted and that everyone regrets. Israel is not destroyed, but the world that allowed this war to happen is being destroyed, and all of us, whether we live in Tel Aviv or Texas or Tokyo, are going to live with the consequences of this destruction for years too.